Friendships are meant to feel supportive, mutual, and nurturing, but sometimes we find ourselves in friendships that leave us drained, doubting ourselves, and questioning our worth. Today, let's break down 5 clear signs your friend may actually be a narcissist. When you think of a good friend, you often imagine someone who listens to you, shares the space with you, and allows the friendship to feel balanced. But when your friend is a narcissist, that balance rarely exists. In fact, one of the earliest and most obvious signs that you may be dealing with this dynamic is the way they constantly need to be the center of attention. At first, this can look charming. They might seem exciting, engaging, and even magnetic in social settings. They have a way of drawing people in with their stories, their confidence, and their ability to dominate a room. You may even feel proud to be associated with them because they make an impression wherever they go. But over time, this charm starts to feel one-sided, and you realize that what initially drew you in is the very thing that begins to exhaust you. The need for the spotlight doesn't always show up in obvious ways. Sometimes it's subtle. For example, imagine sharing a personal story about something meaningful in your life. Maybe you're opening up about a difficult time you went through or a big achievement you worked hard for. Instead of sitting with you in that moment and acknowledging what you've shared, this type of friend redirects the conversation back to themselves. If you've had a hard day, suddenly their day was harder. If you've accomplished something, they quickly share how they did something even bigger, better, or more challenging. Slowly, you begin to realize that your moments never fully belong to you. They are hijacked, reframed, and absorbed into their narrative. This constant redirection can leave you feeling minimized. It creates a dynamic where you almost stop sharing, because deep down you know your words will either be dismissed or turned into a stepping stone for their story. Over time, you may notice yourself shrinking in the friendship, holding back your joys and struggles because you expect them to be overshadowed. This is not what healthy friendship looks like. A true friend celebrates your wins and sits with you through your losses. They don't need to make everything about them, but when you're dealing with someone who thrives on being the focus, your experiences are rarely honored. Instead, they are used as fuel for their ongoing performance. The spotlight behavior also extends into group dynamics. Picture being at a gathering where you're all sharing stories or laughing together. A narcissistic friend will often find ways to take control of the conversation. They interrupt, dominate, and guide attention back to themselves. If the group is laughing at someone else's joke, they'll quickly step in with a bigger story or a louder punchline, unwilling to allow anyone else to hold attention for too long. On the surface, it may look like they are just lively or entertaining, but the underlying truth is that they struggle when they are not the focal point. It's not just about wanting attention. It's about needing it to validate their sense of self. The impact on you, the friend, can be draining. Over time, you may feel more like an audience member than a participant in the friendship. You're there to listen, applaud, and support, but when the roles reverse, they don't know how to sit in the background for you. And because they are often charismatic, it can be confusing. You may rationalize their behavior, telling yourself, that's just their personality, or they're just more outgoing than me. But if you pay attention, you'll see the imbalance clearly. The friendship feeds them, but starves you. You're left emotionally depleted because you are giving far more than you're receiving. Another subtle consequence of always being pushed out of the spotlight is that it can begin to erode your sense of worth. You start questioning whether your stories matter, whether your voice matters, and whether your presence truly has value in the relationship. And that's dangerous because friendship should lift you up, not make you feel invisible. Narcissistic individuals often thrive on this dynamic because it keeps them elevated while keeping others quiet, compliant, and out of the way. What's important to understand is that this behavior is not about confidence or charisma alone. Confidence allows someone to shine without dimming others. Narcissism, on the other hand, thrives on making others smaller so they can feel bigger. That constant need to reclaim the spotlight is not about connection, it's about control. And once you recognize this pattern, you begin to see it everywhere, in their conversations, in their reactions, in their inability to let you or anyone else hold attention for too long. When you start noticing that you walk away from interactions feeling unseen, unheard, and overshadowed, it's a strong sign that your friend may not just be self-focused, but operating from a deeply narcissistic place. One of the most painful realizations in a friendship with a narcissistic person is how little your feelings actually matter to them. At first, it may not be obvious, because they can present as attentive, enthusiastic, and even supportive when things are light and easy. But when you truly need them, when you're struggling, hurting, or just needing to be heard, the lack of empathy becomes unmistakable. Instead of offering comfort or simply listening, they often dismiss, minimize, or redirect your emotions. Over time, this leaves you feeling small, unheard, and emotionally isolated, even though you're supposed to be in a friendship that brings closeness and connection. Imagine opening up to a friend about something deeply personal. Perhaps you're dealing with stress at work, heartbreak in a relationship, or disappointment in yourself. A healthy friend might say, "I'm so sorry you're going through this. I'm here for you." But a narcissistic friend may respond in ways that sting. They might say you're overreacting, or it's not that big of a deal. Sometimes they'll go a step further and immediately pivot the focus back to themselves, saying something like, "That's nothing. You should hear what happened to me last week." What should have been a moment of closeness, instead, becomes another opportunity for them to center themselves, leaving you with the heavy feeling that your emotions simply don't matter. This pattern doesn't just appear in moments of pain. Even when you're celebrating something positive, the lack of empathy shows itself. Let's say you've accomplished a big goal, maybe finishing a project or getting recognized for your hard work. Instead of sharing in your excitement, they might downplay your achievement or point out flaws. They could say, "Well, anyone could do that," or "It's not really such a big deal." What could have been a chance for the friendship to strengthen, instead, becomes a moment of deflation. Their inability to feel genuine joy for you exposes the truth. Your emotions, whether happy or sad, are secondary to their own agenda. Another way this shows up is through subtle invalidation. Narcissistic friends often make you question whether your emotions are even legitimate. They might tell you you're too sensitive, too dramatic, or always making things about yourself. Ironically, they project their own behavior onto you. These small but repeated jabs can cause you to second-guess yourself, wondering if you're really the problem. Over time, this erodes your self-trust. You stop leaning on them when you need comfort, because you've learned that vulnerability will only lead to dismissal or judgment. This absence of empathy is not just about failing to listen. It's about an inability to genuinely connect with your inner world. True empathy requires curiosity and care. It's not about fixing the problem, but about sitting with you in it. A narcissistic friend doesn't have the patience or willingness to do this because your emotional world doesn't serve theirs. They often see your struggles as inconveniences or distractions from what they want to focus on, themselves, and when they do show concern, it can feel performative, as though they're checking a box rather than truly understanding. The damage of this pattern runs deep. Friendships are meant to be safe spaces where you can be real, raw, and authentic. When you consistently encounter a lack of empathy, you learn to shut parts of yourself down. You begin editing your emotions, telling yourself, they won't understand, so why bother? This self-censorship creates loneliness even when you're not physically alone. You could be sitting right beside them, but emotionally, you feel distant. The very friendship that should offer closeness ends up highlighting your isolation. It's also important to recognize how this lack of empathy can play out during conflicts. In healthy friendships, disagreements can be worked through with listening, compromise, and respect for each other's perspectives. But with a narcissistic friend, conflict often becomes one-sided. They can't step into your shoes or acknowledge your hurt, because that would require vulnerability and accountability. Instead, they dismiss your perspective, turn the blame back on you, or twist the narrative so you end up apologizing for bringing up your feelings in the first place. This cycle reinforces the painful message that your emotions don't count, while theirs always take priority. When you step back and see the pattern clearly, it's not just about the occasional insensitive comment. It's about a consistent refusal to validate, support, or acknowledge your inner experience. The lack of empathy becomes the foundation of the friendship, and that foundation is deeply unstable. Relationships like this often leave you feeling emotionally starved, because no matter how much you give, you never feel fed in return. At its core, a friendship without empathy isn't really a friendship at all. It's a performance where one person plays the role of the audience and the other plays the star. You deserve better than that. You deserve to be seen, to be heard, and to be cared for. When your feelings are constantly brushed aside, it's a warning sign, not just about the health of the friendship, but about the person you're sharing your life with. Recognizing this truth is painful, but it's also the first step toward choosing connections where your emotions truly matter. Control and manipulation are at the heart of many unhealthy friendships with narcissistic individuals, and they often appear in ways that are subtle at first, but become more obvious the longer you spend time with them. At the beginning of the friendship, things may feel exciting and easygoing, but as the dynamic deepens, you might notice an uncomfortable pattern where you are constantly being steered, guilt, tripped, or pressured into decisions that suit them rather than you. Unlike healthy friendships, which are based on mutual respect and choice, this kind of connection feels like you are gradually losing your freedom. The manipulation may not always be loud or obvious. In fact, it is often cloaked in language that makes you doubt yourself. One of the most common tactics is gaslighting, where your friend makes you question your own memory, judgment, or feelings. You might recall an event a certain way, only to hear them say, "That never happened," or "You're remembering it wrong." Over time, you begin to wonder if you can even trust your own perception of reality. That doubt works to their advantage because once you stop trusting yourself, you start leaning on them more heavily, giving them even greater control. Another powerful tool they use is guilt. A narcissistic friend has a way of framing situations so that you feel responsible for their emotions, even when you're not. If you decline an invitation, they might say, "Wow, I guess I just don't matter to you anymore." Or if you can't meet their needs, They'll remind you of all the things they've supposedly done for you. The implication is clear. You owe them. Healthy friends respect boundaries and understand when you cannot show up every time. A narcissistic friend, however, thrives on making you feel guilty so that you comply with their expectations, often at the expense of your own well-being. Sometimes the control is expressed through more covert strategies, such as the silent treatment. Rather than openly discussing a conflict or disappointment, they withdraw and withhold communication until you cave in and chase after them. The message is that their approval is conditional, and if you want to keep the friendship intact, you have to bend to their terms. This tactic creates a sense of insecurity because you never quite know where you stand. The fear of abandonment keeps you walking on eggshells, careful not to upset them again. Manipulation also shows up in how they frame themselves as the victim. Even when they are clearly in the wrong, they can spin the story in such a way that you end up apologizing. They may cry, exaggerate, or bring up unrelated events to shift focus away from their behavior and back onto how badly they've supposedly been treated. Before you know it, you're comforting them when they were the one who caused the hurt in the first place. This role reversal not only allows them to escape accountability, but also strengthens their control over you, because it leaves you confused and constantly second guessing your own role in friendship. Another form of manipulation lies in how they test and push your boundaries. They may ask for favors that feel small at first, but gradually these requests grow larger and more demanding. When you try to set limits, they either guilt you, dismiss you, or act wounded to make you feel as though you're being selfish. The unspoken message is that your boundaries don't matter, and if you want to maintain the friendship, you have to keep giving in. Over time, this can leave you exhausted and drained, carrying the weight of a friendship that feels more like an obligation than a choice. The effect of this constant control and manipulation is profound. You begin to lose confidence in your ability to make independent decisions. You question yourself more, you silence your needs, and you start shaping your behavior around what will keep them happy. Instead of a friendship that empowers you, you're stuck in a dynamic where you're always calculating how to avoid conflict or criticism. The balance is gone, replaced by a structure where one person holds the power and the other is kept in a submissive role. What makes this dynamic especially challenging is how convincing and persuasive the manipulative tactics can be. Narcissistic individuals often know exactly which buttons to press and which words to use to get their way. They are skilled at exploiting your kindness, your loyalty, and your desire to maintain the friendship. And because you care, you may find yourself tolerating behaviors that you would never accept from others. But the truth is that a friendship built on control is not a friendship at all. Friendships are meant to be spaces of trust, respect, and freedom. When manipulation enters the picture, it strips away your sense of safety and choice. Recognizing the subtle patterns, the gaslighting, the guilt, tripping, the silent treatments, the boundary violations allows you to see the relationship for what it is. Once you do, you can begin to reclaim your sense of autonomy, remembering that your feelings, your choices, and your boundaries are valid and deserve to be respected. Exploitation and envy are two of the most telling signs that a friend may actually be a narcissist, and they often work hand in hand. At first, this person may seem generous, fun, and eager to be around you. But if you look closely at the patterns, you begin to see how the relationship is structured less around mutual care and more around what they can get from you. They treat you less like an equal partner in the friendship and more like a resource to be used whenever it benefits them. This could be your time, your attention, your money, or even your emotional energy. And what makes it more painful is how this exploitation often hides behind a mask of normal friendship behaviors, making it harder to recognize until you're already feeling depleted. One of the most common ways exploitation shows up is through emotional labor. You might notice that your friend leans on you constantly for advice, support, and encouragement. Every crisis they face becomes your problem. Every disappointment becomes your job to fix. And every mood swing requires you to be on call. But when the tables turn and you need them to be there for you, they're either too busy, uninterested, or they minimize your struggles altogether. It becomes clear that the friendship flows in one direction. You give, they take. Over time, you begin to feel drained, as though your value in the friendship exists only in how much you can provide for them. Exploitation can also appear in more tangible ways. They may ask for favors repeatedly, borrowing money without paying it back, relying on you for rides, or expecting you to rearrange your schedule for their convenience. At first, you may excuse it, thinking that's what friends do. But real friendship is reciprocal. It's about give and take, not constant giving on one side and taking on the other. The narcissistic friend doesn't see this imbalance as a problem. In fact, they often feel entitled to your help. If you hesitate or try to set a boundary, they may respond with guilt, anger, or disappointment, making you feel selfish for protecting your own needs. Alongside exploitation comes envy, which may be one of the most corrosive forces in the friendship. True friends celebrate your wins and cheer for your success, even when their own life feels challenging. But with a narcissistic friend, your achievements trigger resentment. They may congratulate you on the surface, but underneath you sense the bitterness. Sometimes it's expressed directly, through comments that dismiss your success. That wasn't such a big deal. Or, you just got lucky. Other times it's more subtle, like changing the subject quickly when you share good news, or immediately shifting focus to something they've done that they consider more impressive. Envy also leads to competition, where instead of feeling supported, you feel like you're in a constant race. If you buy something new, they need to outdo it. If you achieve something meaningful, they suddenly bring up their own accomplishments. What should be moments of connection and joy become opportunities for them to measure themselves against you. This can leave you feeling guilty for your success, as though sharing your happiness will only trigger their insecurity. Slowly, you learn to downplay your achievements, keeping parts of your life hidden because you don't want to deal with their envy. The combination of exploitation and envy creates a friendship that is not only draining but also unsafe. You never quite know if your vulnerability will be used against you, or if your joy will spark resentment. You can't rely on them to celebrate your highs or support your lows without making it about themselves. Instead of building you up, the friendship chips away at your energy and confidence. You become a resource to be tapped into, a competitor to be managed, and an emotional sponge for their feelings, all while your own needs go unmet. What makes this dynamic especially damaging is how it distorts your sense of what friendship should feel like. You may start to believe that giving endlessly without receiving much in return is normal, or that keeping your happiness quiet to avoid triggering jealousy is just part of maintaining the peace. But deep down, there is often a gnawing sense of emptiness, because you know this isn't how genuine connection is supposed to work. Healthy friendships are built on reciprocity, empathy, and mutual joy. They don't thrive on envy, and they don't treat one person like a source of endless supply. Recognizing the signs of exploitation and envy is painful, but it is also freeing. It allows you to step back and see that you are not the problem. You are simply caught in a dynamic where your generosity is being taken advantage of, and your success is being resented rather than celebrated. And once you see it clearly, you have the choice to protect your energy, set stronger boundaries, and seek out friendships that truly value who you are, not just what you can provide.